Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Right, this is a kind of, what would you call it? It's a conundrum, right? It's not, I don't think, a team game. I don't think this is a pick a side argument because, well, I'll show you why. I'm going to ask you a question, and then I'm going to ask you another question, and I think that your answer to the second question will slightly change. Perhaps it did me for a minute, your answer to the first question. Okay, so a local council has banned the construction of a synagogue because it could be a terrorist target. This is in Australia, where, of course, they've just had a case involving a terror plot that was thankfully foiled by the authorities. It's near Bondi Beach. And that's my question. The first question becomes, do you agree with the council that's banned the building of a synagogue, a place of worship for Jewish people, so that, because as a place of worship for Jewish people, it would ostensibly be a more prominent target for Islamist terrorism than any other development that could be planned? I don't know if I agree with that, but let's just as a given. So do you agree with the council? Is it a good idea to not build a synagogue because of terrorism fears? Terrorism, of course, designed to make the rest of us change the way that we behave, abandon our freedoms and our rights, because it is our freedoms and our rights that fundamentalists and terrorists and the like most despise about life in the West. Yeah? So what do you reckon? Okay, now try this on for size. Phone lines are open, by the way. If it really is, I mean, if they have intelligence that says there is a particular appetite to start attacking synagogues, all right, just bear with me. Or Catholic churches, to employ my own place of worship. If there is, you know, a genuine reason to believe that Catholic churches or synagogues could be particularly prominent targets for Islamist terrorists, would you want one to open on your street? And there you have, in many ways, the very essence of a good question. Because I think, if you're anything like me, the answer to the first was, this is absolutely outrageous. Why would we give in to what the terrorists want? And the answer to the second is, well, actually, no, if there genuinely is evidence that this is going to be a more prominent target than, I don't know, a new supermarket or a bowling alley, then no. I don't think I would want it on my street. And that, in a way, cuts in a sense to the heart of everything, doesn't it? The idea that your principles, when they come up against reality, often revert to practicalities. I just want to know what you think. For the record, if it was my street, I don't know if this counts as virtue signalling or whatever the phrase du jour is to describe people who like thinking and seek to demonstrate a degree of empathy to others. For the record, if it was my street, I'd be profoundly uncomfortable and very worried, but I would consider it more important to support freedom of religion, freedom of worship. I'd consider it more important to support, in this case, the Jewish community and to give them the place of worship. I think, I don't know, I mean, you tell me, 0345 6060 973, but I think I'd sit there and unless they said we categorically know that they're going to blow up every synagogue in the country if they get the chance, and then you'd sort of think, well, God, this is a humdinger. I think I would be, this is unfortunate, but we can't not build the synagogue. And then a neighbour would say, but that's like painting a target on our street. And I would say, yeah, but what? I don't know. I really don't know. And I don't want it to become a Jewish-Muslim thing, unless you feel absolutely categorically that it has to. That's why I've thrown the Catholic Church into the mix. The idea that if Islamist terrorists were believed to be planning attacks, particular attacks upon Catholic churches, would you want a Catholic church to open on your road? It's 9 minutes after 10. Hit the numbers now. You will get through. 0345 6060 973. The council has apparently used its own risk assessment on the threat posed by Islamic State against it. It just seems a little unlikely to me, but hey, they're doing what they believe that they are justified and compelled to do. It's a few hundred metres from Bondi Beach, so, You know, that's a huge tourist attraction. It's a huge part of the local economy. The idea that if they were to build something there that was a terrorist target, it might impact upon all other areas of the community. Well, I'm doing that thing now. I'm trying to retrospectively construct a defence of a position that I don't really agree with, but I'll level with you. My head says build it. My heart says not on my street. 0345 6060973. Just tell me what you make of this one. And this isn't, I hope this isn't a kind of, that's why I said at the outset, this isn't a team game. I don't think this is a pick a side, because as you've just seen in the space of 4 minutes, I've oscillated from one side to the other and back again. So I want to know what you think, but more importantly, I want to know why, okay? I want to know why you think it. If the council, and they claim to have intelligence, I don't know that they've sort of independently consulted on it or independently investigated, but they claim to have intelligence that suggests a synagogue would become a target for Islamist terrorism, therefore they're not going to build the synagogue. Local rabbi said the decision is unprecedented. And listen to this, because I think he's onto something. Its implications are enormous. It basically implies that no Jewish organisation should be allowed to exist in residential areas. It stands to stifle Jewish existence. And I think he's probably onto something there. It does seem like a fairly grim reality that's being imposed upon this corner of Australia. It's a very sad day, said the Board of Deputies Chief Executive, for Australia if an established community which needs a house of worship is refused permission to build it because of fears that they may pose a threat. So, usually there are other things attendant on issues like this. Usually we come at these things with a slightly more binary approach. You say, do you want a mosque built in your area? And everyone of a certain disposition starts screaming no, and then everybody with a sort of functioning intellect starts screaming, well, can we just think about it and talk about it? This is completely different, because this is people who have absolutely no association with terrorism, essentially being punished for the actions of terrorism. Jews being told that they can't have a synagogue on this street because Islamist terrorists might want to attack them for being Jews. It's the worst kind of white flag when you think about it like that. In fact, I could now muster up a hugely impassioned attack upon this decision. It's absolutely shocking. It's like a baby step towards Holocaust ideology. No, you can't worship because you're a Jew. And these lot over here, they hate you so much they might try to hurt you, and if they do try to hurt you, we might get caught in the crossfire. Ergo, you're not allowed to build your synagogue here. Also, beaches, tourists, rubber rings. How are we going to flog rubber rings if everyone's wandering around frightened of being blown up? All of that, you can do it. You could write a newspaper column right now. You could do a spiel. You could make a speech. And then someone would say to you, okay, if it really is a terrorist target, do you want it on your street? And then what are you going to say? It's 13 minutes after 10. You can email james@lbc.co.uk. You can tweet, you can text, you can get in touch in all the usual ways. But I particularly want you to ring in on this one because, where are we? Because I want to know the why. I haven't got a why. I don't know what I would do. If push came to shove, if I had to make a decision now, someone held a gun to my head, and you had to actually say, do you want it on your street or not? What would you do? Because you'd know in your heart it was wrong to say no. It was actually playing into the hands of the terrorist ideology. It was actually doing what they wanted. You'd know it was. And yet, on the other hand, you'd be thinking, well, hang on a minute. If they think this is a terrorist target, I'd be mad to have it on my own street. What's the answer? Come at this from whatever angle you like. I think it's a wriggly one. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. I know Sue's been in touch to tell me that all synagogues are higher targets than churches. That's why they have extra security at every service around the world. I'd go with you 50-50 on that. I mean, the synagogue, the Jewish community is seen as a more front and centre target for hate crimes than other religious communities are in this country and in other countries. But in terms of a terror attack, I'm not aware of any in Britain that have been specifically directed at synagogues, or indeed any in Australia. The terrorist tactic usually seems to be to cause as much damage as possible to as many people as possible, of as many different kinds as possible. For example, at a pop concert, or at London Bridge. And delighted they are, the Islamic State apologists and supporters, if Muslims get caught up in the carnage, because that kind of proves that the martyrdom is pure or something like that. But I don't know where you will sit on this very simple question. And obviously I want you to call me if you are of the Jewish faith and you think that gives you a particular insight. I don't know. is the short answer. I hope somebody listening to this programme does, because by 11 o'clock, I'd like to know what I would say if that proverbial gun was held to my head. 03456060973. It's 10:15. An Australian council, but the English-speaking countries seem to be of a piece on these sort of stories. It's very strange. It must have something to do with the media, not in any way to dilute or dissipate the reality of Islamist terrorism. The English language-speaking countries, America, Australia and Britain, if you spend a lot of time looking at this stuff online, they have a very peculiar slant on these stories, whereby you've got people living in America who are absolutely convinced that London is overrun by Islamist extremists. And then, of course, you've got people in Germany who are apparently living in no-go areas, despite the fact that your actual Germans are showing unprecedented support for their current government, according to the latest opinion polling. So Australia and America and Britain are being particularly vigilant, could be one word, or groomed could be another, into this conflation of Islamist terrorism with Muslims who aren't terrorists. Okay, and that might be part of the reason why suggestions that a synagogue be built near Bondi Beach have been rejected by the local council because of terrorism fears. Just tell me what you think about this story. Michelle's in Weston. Michelle, what made you pick up the phone?
Good morning.
Hello, Michelle.
My own synagogue is literally metres away from an London Underground station.
Yes.
On two sides, it is surrounded by flats and houses.
Well, most synagogues are in residential areas, aren't they?
And it's across the road from a primary school.
Yes.
Now, the TfL or the school could complain, but the truth of the matter is, Jews are law-abiding and quiet people. They are fools not to.
Well, I mean, as with any sort of self-defining community, there will be lots and lots of law-abiding and good people, and there'll be a few wrong uns as well. I mean, whether you're talking about
in my community,
Capricorns.
I don't think there are any wrong uns, to be honest with you.
Really?
I mean, not in my specific. I'm talking about my specific community, not anyone else.
Okay.
But I'm speaking from personal experience. The recent terror attacks, especially in this country, have been nothing to do with Jewish communities. They've been in Borough Market. It was in Westminster.
I think I may have slightly I don't know if you've misunderstood me or if I'm misunderstanding you. The suggestion is that the synagogue will be a target.
But what synagogues have been targets anywhere?
Well, the council's intelligence is. I mean, you know how often we're told that the Islamist organisations want to destroy Israel and chase every Jew into the sea. The idea that Jews are a particular target of Islamist extremists is something that generally we've been taught by Jewish people.
Look, no.
Yes.
That's because that's what these people say, but it's not necessarily what they do.
Right.
The anti-Semitism comes from lots of different areas, not just from.
So they're not. So I mean, when the text came in earlier from Sue saying you know every synagogue has lots and lots of security. Of course, we're a bigger target than anywhere else. You think she's wrong? Why do the synagogues have all the security then?
Okay, yes, we are a target. I will agree, but so therefore we are not allowed to survive because we're a target.
No, on the contrary. But the council is saying we don't want to build a synagogue here because it will make this corner of our community a target. And in a way, the text explaining about the presence of security guards and the heightened risk at synagogues kind of proves their point, doesn't it?
But maybe the security works.
Well, yes, but the point is they don't want to build a synagogue. Is a synagogue a target or not, is the question. And if you've got lots of security there, then the people worshipping there must believe that it's a target. And the people who don't worship there are just saying, I guess, to try and imagine what the council's logic is, please don't put a target on my street.
So do they have security at Borough Market now?
I don't know that we're sort of having a same conversation, Michelle.
Well, yes, I mean, no, because the thing is that you can talk about Jews being a target.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm referring to the text talking about all the security, saying James, you don't understand. Synagogues are a much bigger target than Catholic churches. That's why they all have security. So then I'm thinking, oh well, maybe that's why they don't want to build one on their street. For the record, I think it should be built. I think it's giving in to terrorists, but I don't know that the reasons you thought were going to support my position actually help. But they could actually be unhelpful.
I think it's terribly, terribly sad.
Right, we can definitely agree on that. We can definitely agree on that. But I think we've highlighted precisely what the problem is. The first two contributions, sue by text. That's why there's lots of security outside synagogues, James, because they are a much bigger target than Catholic churches. And then Michelle on the phone. Why should synagogues be singled out as specific targets? Answer, because, well, you know, with respect, we believe that they are a special target. And so do most people worshipping in them. The amount of times I've been told that over the years is pretty close to countless. Asif is in Barnes. Asif, what do you think?
Hi, James. Well, just very quickly, I'll try to be as brief as possible. I think...
Can I give you a word of advice? Every second spent telling me how brief you're going to be is a second dedicated to not being brief. Now, crack on.
You know, you've hit the nail on the head. So if I had a synagogue built next to me, I'd feel very, very safe. I mean, I'm a Muslim. I feel very, very safe, and I'd probably go out with my door open. Why? Because if there is a terrorist threat, etc., then there'd be enhanced security to reflect that. That was just the car turned on, but I'm on hands-free.
All right, carry on.
And so, as a result, if you have whether it's an airport, a mosque, a synagogue, a church, is irrelevant. You'll have enhanced security and to reflect the fact that there's a so-called terrorist alert. And therefore, I'd be super safe rather than unsafe.
And not for, I mean, a suicide attack. I mean, with the kind of terrorism that we're talking about. Have we already fallen into a trap here, I'm wondering? Because it is this notion that the terrorist threat is constant and ever-present and looming large. This is what I mean about the English-speaking countries. If you look at the numbers, and I know some people don't like statistics and facts, but 6,130 rural workers have died from falling off vehicles, 206 have died from electrocution, and 1,700 indigenous people have died from diabetes during a period of time in which I think 2 people have been killed by terrorism, according to Incorrigible FCA's research this morning.
But, James, you're more likely to be killed by a piece of furniture falling on your head.
A coconut. I don't know about a piece of furniture.
Okay. Well, it depends who built it.
Well, no, hang on a minute. I mean, furniture doesn't routinely fall out of the sky and land on people. Coconuts, I have it on impeccable authority, do. So what the council... I don't think the council is deliberately scaremongering, but they are speaking to a narrative of constant fear, which is being punted by the English-speaking media, which is why Australia and America and Britain are uniquely in the world covering these stories in this fashion.
I think, you know, you hit the nail on the head earlier in the earlier conversation in your previous call about intelligence from the council. I mean, that's a bit of an oxymoron.
Seems like it, doesn't it? Yes.
But if you give in to any... I mean, let's just say, for example, somebody wants to open a Tesco's on the end of my road, and someone says, well, we're going to firebomb it. Well, does that mean you're not going to open it? You cannot give in to any form of threats with anybody. Unfortunately, even if there are casualties, so to speak, you have to stand up for them. So, because obviously, just like this whole conversation that Nick had previously with the LGBT, whatever, you know, at any one time in society and time, there will be societies that are oppressed, whether it's Muslims, Jews, Christians, gays, whatever, it doesn't matter. You still have to stand up for their rights. Because next time it could be your group. That's the problem, isn't it? Is that if it's not our group, it's a little bit hard sometimes to persuade people that I mean, if you like them all so much, Asif, why don't you let them sleep in your house? Is kind of the response when you suggest that we should be helping others. For the record, I completely agree. I mean, the more I think about it, the more disgraceful this is. But of course, the people who should be arguing with me are the people who believe that we are living in constant and terrible danger. The kind of people that you see on Fox News going on about how London is an unhappy city. London's the best city on the planet, for the time being at least. So that narrative that's out there, designed... You see it in Donald Trump's, the transcripts of his conversations that were released yesterday. He doesn't even pretend that his immigration policies are about keeping America safe. He says, I'm the best in the world for keeping people out. I want to keep people out. It's got nothing to do with fear or terrorism or Islam or reality. It's about creating a sort of siege mentality among the population. And then what? Banning synagogues. Nice work. Andrew's in Chertsey. Andrew, what would you like to say?
Yeah, I've just come back over from Sydney, and I'm in support for them not to build the synagogue at Bondi Beach. After being in Sydney for about 5 years, albeit they are, have a lot less tolerance for people, misbehaving and causing issues. But I did find that whilst my time being in Sydney, I did feel a lot more safe. I felt people were a lot more relaxed, and I think that was fundamentally down to the fact that Australia is willing to stand up and actually have something to say about the terrorist issue.
And then what they're saying here is no place of worship for Jews. How does that make you feel safer?
Well, I can't comment because I'm not Jewish.
No, you can comment on feeling safer because of the policy that we're discussing. That's what you've rang in to say. So I'm saying, how does banning the building of a synagogue make you feel safer?
Well, I think it builds an overall picture of how the people feel that the Australian government is actually stepping in to make provisions to prevent...
No, mate, you misunderstood the question. How does banning the building of a synagogue by Bondi Council make you, as a visitor or a resident of Sydney, feel safer?
And I think you're misunderstanding the bigger picture of what these provisions can actually have put in place.
Well, I'll tell you what. You first of all answer my question, and then we can talk about the bigger picture. How does telling a congregation of Jews that they're not allowed to have a place of worship where they want it make you, Andrew, in Chertsey, feel safer?
It's all part of a bigger picture in that you have to have...
I just want to know about your sense of personal security. You said, I felt safer. These policies make me feel safer. It's almost as if there's something that you believe and feel, but you're not prepared to say out loud in public, Andrew.
No. It's just because when you're trying to think on the spot, it can be difficult to try and...
But you rang me. You're not thinking on the spot. I haven't knocked on your door and stuck my head through your window and said, tell me what you think about this. You've made a conscious decision out of 900,000 people listening. You've chosen to be the one who's ringing in to say, yeah, I like this idea. I support this idea. It makes me feel safer. So I don't think I'm breaking out of the bounds of reason when I say to you, why does telling a bunch of Jewish people that they can't have a synagogue make you feel safer?
Well, I suppose that directly then doesn't make me feel safer.
Well, that was very easy. What a waste of both our time. 29 minutes after 10 is the time. 0345 6060 973. What Andrew, of course, meant when he talked about the bigger picture was he quite likes the idea of fostering this sense of all Muslims being terrorists and constant fear being in place. That is what this policy does, whether it's designed to do so or not, whether it is a result of that mindset or whether it is an attempt to promote that mindset. Yeah, I like the idea of doing anything that is supposed to be a response to the threat of Islamist terrorism, because anything that we do in response to the threat of Islamist terrorism makes the fear of Islamist terrorism bigger, and the bigger the fear of Islamist terrorism, the closer we can get to conflating it with anti-Muslim bigotry. It's 10:30. Why would building or not building a synagogue in a curious corner, a very popular corner of Australia, smack in the tourist and surfing centre of Bondi Beach, why would that please anybody? Answer, I don't actually know. And Andrew had a crack a minute ago at trying to explain why it would make him feel safer, but well, as he said himself, it didn't really stand up to scrutiny, that claim. So what was the real reason for being in support of this? I don't know. My fear would be that it adds to the growing narrative of a terrorised population, terrorised more by media coverage than by actual terrorist attacks. That's the astonishing thing. That is why these sort of controversies and stories are currently only blowing up in English-speaking countries. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. Just to give me your take on it, because now that, you know, we've had a little look at what some of the reasoning behind the idea that it shouldn't be built is, I'm 100% certain it should be built, right up until the point where you say to me, no, it really is a target. Do you want it on your street? Mohammed is in Birmingham. Mohammed, what would you like to say?
Hello, yeah. Hi, James.
Hello,
I
mate.
just want to say they should absolutely build it. Go ahead and build it. Why should they give in to these terrorist attacks? And why should a place of worship be rejected by any faith? I'm Muslim, and I've had similar treatments in the UK. But these stupid idiots from the EDL or Britain First wanted to ban mosques being built in Manchester or all across the UK, and I think it's absolutely wrong. Why is a synagogue or a church or a mosque? It's a place of worship. So why should such buildings be rejected?
Well, I mean, the reasons that the sort of far-right types that you described would give for not wanting to see mosques would not be the same as the reasons that this council give for not wanting to build a synagogue. But it's hard to escape the conclusion that the result feels identical, doesn't it? It's about suppressing. It's about giving in to terrorist fear or ideology.
And I think they really shouldn't do that. And if they're getting such threats, they should up their security, but they shouldn't reject the place.
Yeah, but if you've got, I mean, I forget what the weapon laws are in Australia, but imagine it was France, where, you know, armed police are commonplace, and imagine that a synagogue was, or even armed private security guards will be permissible in some democracies, like America, for example. Would you want them to build on your street a building, regardless of what the building was being used for, which was at such
risk or fear of attack that you have armed guards standing outside it all the time. You know, your kids walk past it on the way to school and back. It's like a target painted on your road.
I can fully understand that, but I would still support it, and I would still give my 100% permission for them to go ahead and build it. You must realize the problem between Muslims and Jewish people is in Israel, and Israel alone, because of Palestine. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to blow it up. So what? They receive some sort of intelligence, and they want to act accordingly to that. But I still think they should strongly go ahead with it.
Well, I do as well, but you remind us that principles have costs. Principles aren't free. So the principle of freedom of religion involves risk. In this case, the principle of building the synagogue, because not to build it involves kowtowing to, not so much terrorism, I would say, as this curious kind of the thing that's grown up alongside the terrorist, which is, I mean, people who are not Muslims trying to make the Islamist terrorism an even bigger, you know, Donald Trump almost pleading for an attack, it seems sometimes, or we're desperate as soon as reporting on something in Sweden and not mentioning stuff that's happened in Canada or America because the murders weren't committed by brown Muslim people. There's been a crime in Sweden, Donald Trump will talk about it. There's been a crime in Michigan, he won't, because the perpetrator isn't part of this grouping. And so once you've got this double-headed ISIS hand in hand with far-right ideology in this country, this is where it leads. I think it is. But again, can I look you in the eye? Could I look my children in the eye and say we are in full support of having this building built on our street, even though it will mean ... I suppose the other question you have to ask, and I'm a little reluctant asking this, is whether or not the security outside synagogues in this country, perhaps, or in other countries, has actually more to do with reassuring the people inside than actually repelling any potential attackers on the outside. James is in Barnes. James, what would you like to say?
Yeah, hi, James. I think you nearly actually touched on the point I want to make, nearly.
I'm groping around in the dark, James. My apologies if I accidentally touched you.
You have, but you were nearly there, I think. I don't think this is about what it is about, actually. Ironically, it's actually about anti-Semitism. And what it is far-right, anti-Semitic people using the banner of terrorism and ISIS to say, oh, you know, we can't have it here because there's a threat of an attack. Well, how can there be a threat of an attack on something that's not there? And how many... Well,
that doesn't work. You can't have that bit, because stop talking when I'm talking over you. The first bit you can't have. The threat is posed when it is built, ergo they will not build it. So you can't say there's no threat because it hasn't been built. The reason they're not building it is because they believe there will be a threat when it has been built. So you can't have that bit. What was the next bit?
Well, no, you can have that bit.
You jolly well can't.
How many synagogues in Sydney, which is where it's proposed to be built, have been attacked? Have you heard of any?
No, I haven't. You can have that bit. You can have that bit. You can have that bit. So you're questioning the validity of their intelligence.
I'm questioning that it does lead open. I'm not saying it is the case, but it can lead open to anti-Semitic councils or people with anti-Semitic views saying, well, we don't really want a synagogue in this area, do we? So what we'll do, the easiest way to suggest and not to be able to build it is to suggest that we think it poses a danger to the residents because of a possible attack. I mean, that's my logic.
And you'd only get...
That's probably true.
No, you'd only get that past the public if you've got this backdrop narrative.
Backdrop narrative of?
Sometimes it seems that right-wing journalists and commentators and demagogues are doing more to terrorise the West with Islamist fundamentalism than your actual Islamist fundamentalists are.
That's exactly my point. I don't believe that... if you look at, and I think one of your colleagues, somebody else has mentioned it, most of the attacks on Jewish cemeteries or Jewish synagogues in this country have not been Islamic attacks, have been attacks by anti-Semitic people. They could be Chinese, they could be Greek, who knows? But they're not...
I wish you hadn't specified. I'll get complaints now.
Sorry, I've got nothing against the Greeks. I love the Greeks.
Or the Chinese.
You get my point.
Or the Chinese.
From any nationality.
Or the Chinese.
I'm using that as an extreme.
No, I know, but you just singled out the Greeks and said you've got nothing against them. You left the Chinese hanging.
They could. I apologise to Chinese.
All right, thank you.
From any, you know what I'm saying.
Of course I do.
From any nationality, I think you'll find that any anti-Semitic attacks on synagogues or Jewish graves that there might have been in the last 5 years in this country have got nothing to do with Islamic terrorism at all. They are anti-Semitic attacks, and that's what they are.
And that the far right, I mean, whether they realise they're doing it or not, and that's going to be the big question that needs answering over the course of the next couple of years. But when we talked about Holocaust denial earlier in the week, some similar themes emerged, and it's in the interests of white supremacists who usually have a big soft spot for anti-Semitism to keep these flames burning, because they allow the othering of people, and when communities and countries start othering, Jews are normally at the front of the queue.
That's right, and also, as I think you said as well, is look at the attacks, sadly, that have been in France and in this country in the last 3 years, in Nice, in Paris, in Manchester, in London. None of them have targeted Jews, because the Islamist terrorists are not about getting at Jews. They're about getting at the Western democracies and the Western governments. And as your Muslim colleague caller just now said, the problem, the attacks on Jewish people are centered around Israel. Because that's where the problem comes from. But the Muslim terrorists, the Islamic terrorists...
That's an attack upon the West.
The American government.
Yes, the great shaitan, whatever the phrase is. And so I do enjoy these conversations, but they don't necessarily fill me with optimism for the near future of our communities. Of an age where the idea... I remember I was actually baffled by anti-Semitism when I started doing this job, because I'd never really come across it before. Islamophobia, some people object to that word because they say they're perfectly justified to find fault with the text of the Quran. And there's a sort of logical consistency to that position. So anti-Muslim bigotry is a better word perhaps than Islamophobia. That was a point that people like Christopher Hitchens were making. But, you know, the notion that actually the more you split us, the easier it is to pick us off. It's beginning to gather quite a lot of pace, isn't it? And this, it would seem to me, is Jewish people paying the price for this sort of nightmare narrative that is being punted in the English-speaking world, largely by right-wing media. And don't forget that the second biggest shareholder in Rupert Murdoch's organisation until relatively recently was a member of the Saudi Arabian royal family. And we know that Saudi Arabia is responsible for exporting more terrorist Islamist ideology than any other territory on the planet. I don't know where all the pieces fit together. I just thought I'd throw that fact out there for your cogitation. It's 10:45. I mean, it's a fascinating conversation, this, and not one that I would claim I'd conducted with any particular expertise, because I'm in a state of genuine confusion and a little bit of fear, but not fear of terrorism or fear of action, fear of thought movements, fear of this coalescing notion of I mean, we have to possibly come up with a new name for it: alt-right, far-right, whatever it is, the white supremacist, this kind of idea that English language speaking countries in particular seem to magnify and obsess about Islam and some of the problems associated with that religion on a level that is beginning to look a little bit sinister, almost as if they're trying to create a environment in which we surrender a lot of our liberties. Including, in the case of this Australian story, freedom of religion, which is a crucial part of pluralist democracies, liberal democracies. Yeah, we don't want freedom of religion. We're not going to let you build a synagogue. Why not? Are you anti-Semitic? No. It's the Muslims we don't like. Eh? Sam's in Golders Green. Sam, what would you like to say?
Oh, quite a few things, actually. Hi, James.
Carry on, Sam.
I mean, the first thing I want to say is actually something that I've noticed in England. A few years ago, came across a Conservative Party, a local organiser, who was telling me, I'm Jewish, and he was telling me he felt the need to kind of say, because at the time there was a planning application by the Jewish community where I live, for an Arab, which is something, it's sort of a string which is put around areas and it allows religious views to carry on.
Yes, I'm familiar with that.
And he was saying, he was a Conservative Party organiser, and he was saying, I oppose that, but not because I don't want the Jews or anything. It's just, if we let you have something, then we'll have to let the Muslims have something, and then they'll all come and live here.
Oh, and then you had that UKIP bloke saying about the ritual slaughter ban that was in their manifesto. He was caught on the record saying to a Jewish voter, "Oh, you're collateral damage. We didn't really mean to catch you up in this. It was
right."
So it's got nothing to do with the animals.
That particular issue, I find it's obscene, because that's actually one of the first things the Nazis did when they came into power, was ban that type of slaughter.
Yes, it is.
And I find that issue is just the fact that people are bringing it up again and claiming it as a progressive issue. I just find make it the last thing.
2017. Yeah, no, it's a great point.
Yeah, so I think a lot of the time Islamophobia is used as a sort of as like, oh, well, we're only being anti-Semitic because we want to be Islamophobic.
Yes. I mean, you're laughing, but that is what we both just described. Both examples that we just described are precisely that.
It's pretty horrendous. But at the same time, you do keep... I feel like you are playing down a certain level of threat. I think not building synagogues is a ridiculous response.
Yes, so do I.
And I think it's based on both Islamophobia and anti-Semitism. But
yes.
I think you're saying it's the English-speaking world is magnifying this threat. I'll tell you, I mean, I travel a lot, and in France, Germany, Italy, the amount of security around synagogues is, justified in Belgium as well. It's justified because they have come under attack.
Yes, but I don't mind security being there. That's not the point. It's saying that we shouldn't build them at all is where the...
I agree with you on that, but I'm saying when you're saying people are magnifying the level of the threat, I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think the English-speaking world is actually a place that has the least security around synagogues. If you go to Italy, you will see the most heavily armed soldiers you will ever see in your life standing outside jeeps or Humvees outside synagogues.
And of course, during the Paris attacks, the Bataclan attacks, we forget that a Jewish supermarket was specifically targeted during those attacks as well, don't we?
100%. And it's not the case that these aren't targeted, or that, but yeah, particularly this kind of Islamist terrible.
I think you're right. I think I need to clarify what I was sort of thinking out loud. It isn't so much magnifying the threat. The threat is real, but I think the conflation of Islamist terrorists with every other kind of Muslim, that seems to be a peculiarly English language media obsession. This attempt. I mean, the Sun had a headline recently that said we need less Islam. It didn't say we need less terrorism. It said we need less Islam. Could you imagine a headline in the 1930s saying we need fewer Jews? They don't seem very far apart to me.
There were such headlines in the Daily Mail.
Well, of course.
But I think there's something to be said about it's not just a case of you can't give in to this threat by saying don't build synagogues, but
this is you're the best. You're in a way you're the emblematic call of this hour, because you are adamant that the threat is real and present, and I've got no beef with that. But if the threat is real and present, you need to persuade me as a non-Jew why I should have this target painted on my road.
Because I mean, it's not me to say to you that you need to accept my people into your society. It's you to decide which sort of kind of society you want. And it's just one where you say...
Well, I don't mind having the people. I'm being the devil's advocate now. I don't mind having the people in my society, but I just don't want the target on my road.
Well, James, I had to tell you, I'm emigrating in 10 days.
Where are you going?
I'm going to Israel.
Wow. And do you know what I just realised when I spoke to you then? When I said, crikey, when I said I don't mind the people, I just don't want the synagogue, that's just a step towards, and what do the fascists talk about now all the time? Deporting people.
But I think I understand when people say that, and I don't want to live in a society where they're in control, but that I understand that. But if people don't want to live in a society that is genuinely pluralist and that does have real people who are other than themselves, then they're going to have to say, right, we're going to take a stand. We're not going to say.
And that seems to be where the divide is
we won't have Jews.
People who don't want to live in a pluralist society, people who are fascistic in outlook. Fascism, multifarious definitions of it, but fundamentally it's about creating a society where people like me, the leader, get treated better under the law than everybody else does. The problem is that everybody else isn't a homogenous group. This is how fascism wins, and this is a beautiful example of it. Beautiful in the academic sense, because what you have here is two peoples who are portrayed regularly and usually rightly as enemies, certainly in the context of the Middle East, in the context of Israel. When Sam, bon voyage, Sam, I hope the move goes swimmingly. Portrayed as polar opposites, and yet under the lens of fascism, of course, they're the same. They're both non-us. They're both others. So you might say we're not building a synagogue. How soon before have we had anyone ring in? Here we go. Brian in St John's Wood. I don't know if we're going to have time for him. He's rung in to say if they don't build a synagogue, then they shouldn't build a mosque either. Which is kind of like mission accomplished for ISIS. I don't know how to pronounce your name. Is it Cengiz in Canary Wharf?
Perfect, Cengiz.
Wow.
Yeah.
Hi, Cengiz. What's on your mind?
What I was thinking was if they were going to build an embassy there, a British embassy or an American embassy, that's more of a threat than a synagogue. Would they have agreed to do that?
What do you think?
I think they would have given them permission.
Well, they'd have a bit of a diplomatic incident on their hands if they didn't. Anyone who's been near the American embassy in Grosvenor Square in London at the moment will know that it's like a bunker. They've got concrete barriers around it. It's
and armed police and so on.
Armed police outside because it is supposedly a terrorist target, and yet other people living in Grosvenor Square haven't had any say in that process at all, have they?
No, none whatsoever. So to me, it's more than just the threat there.
I think you're right. It does seem to be part of this. Well, this narrative of terrorising being done not by terrorists, but by coverage and commentators.
Absolutely. So it's just what they want us to believe rather than what the actual thing that's going on.
But if you were at home, in your own home, and there isn't any embassy nearby, or synagogue, or mosque, or church, or supermarket, or anything else that you could construe as a particular target for terrorism, and then they said we're going to introduce one from a starting point of 0, we're going to introduce a potential target, you wouldn't be too chuffed about it, mate.
No one would be. I don't think anybody in their right mind would say, yeah, I'm happy for it to be here. But if we all done that, then it wouldn't be fair on anybody, would it? No,
and that's the point. There's always going to be somebody that is at the sharper end of the principle, and it's hardest for them to adopt the principle because they're going to be impacted by it. I mean, this is relevant to almost every debate we ever have, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So, build it.
Absolutely, they have to build it. And by the way, I'm a Muslim, so it's nothing to do with religion or race. It's just wrong.
No, almost every caller has been either Jewish or Muslim this hour, I think. And I'm making a presumption about Andrew, given that he's emigrating to Israel in 10 days. Maybe, I don't think unfairly, but almost all singing, just to bring a bit of Christianity into it, all singing from the same hymn sheet. So who isn't? Who doesn't think that Jews should have freedom of worship, or Muslims should have freedom of worship, or Irish Catholics, that will be next, history suggests, should have freedom of worship? Who doesn't? Well, I think the word has been written. You've reminded me, a few of you. I said, we need a new word. Alt-right doesn't quite cut it. Far-right, it's just fascist. Fascist. That's the word. Whether you like it or not, it's a historical truth that these are the tactics of fascism. So, of course, is an attempt to undermine objective truth, which is what hashtag fake news is all about. Donald Trump now completely busted for lying through his teeth about phone calls with the Australian and the Mexican leaders because the White House have leaked the transcripts. So he will say in public, X happened, then in black and white, printed out on official White House stationery, the transcript reveals that Y happened. X never happened at all, but he still stands up. Yesterday it was the time of Golf magazine to become part of the fake news conspiracy. This is not, a Hollywood film. This is true. You have a president of the United States of America who is inflaming and driven by a white supremacist base, who is now attempting to completely undermine the concept of objective truth. That's how you have pogroms. You can only have pogroms if people really believe that Jews drink the blood of Christian babies, or if people really believe that every single Muslim, regardless of what they say, do, or how they behave, or what they believe, every single Muslim is a threat because the fascists say so. And I may be jumping the gun slightly. This seems to me to be a symptom of that situation, and that situation is peculiar to English-speaking countries. Strange one now. I loved that conversation. Love may seem an odd word, but when you feel a little grey cells whirring, especially as we're living in an era where so much effort is being put into discouraging us from thinking about things, that was tough. But I'm going to end it, that conversation about a council's decision in Australia not to build a synagogue because it might be a terrorist threat, with Gareth in Sunbury's text, which actually I wish this had occurred to me sooner. Gareth, it's pretty much a close down of all the debate, I think. This is crazy, James. Does this mean we can't build stadiums or music venues or train stations or buses because they are terrorist targets too? And that, I guess, is a question and an answer in itself, because there are people who wish us harm, who hope that we do start abandoning our freedoms and our rights on that sort of scale. Weirdly, there are people among us who also want us to do that. There are people who are, encouraging their neighbours to give up their freedoms because of this fear.